Good morning. Today's lesson is about the Tudors dynasty, a family who ascended to the throne of England after the War of the Roses. During the reign of Edward III, uh, after the reign of Edward III, his son Richard II imposed heavy taxes and ignored Parliament, so starting a period of conflicts between the monarch and Parliament. Eventually, his cousin Henry, Duke of Lancaster, led an uprising against him with the support of many nobles. In 1399, Richard surrendered the throne to Henry IV, who became the first Lancastrian king of England. His son, Henry V, who succeeded him, became one of the most popular kings in the English history, and he was the second Lancastrian king. He died in 1422, leaving an infant son, Henry VI, and England was ruled by a council of nobles. When Henry was old enough to rule, he suffered from mental illness. So Richard, Duke of York, was chosen to rule England as regent until the king recovered in 1455. At this point, the rivalry between the two families of York and Lancaster developed into a civil war known as the War of the Roses, which lasted for 30 years, from 1455 to 1485. The name came from the symbols of the two royal families. The House of Lancaster had a red rose, and the House of York had a white rose as its symbol. The conflict between the two families was caused by several factors. The most important one was that a great number of powerful lords had their own private armies at their own personal command. So the civil war ended when finally Richard III, the last Yorkist king, was defeated and killed at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485 by the Lancastrian Henry Tudor, founder of the House of Tudor. Henry married Elizabeth of York, Edward IV's daughter, and this united the two roses and became king as Henry VII. The Tudor dynasty was made up of Henry VII, the founder, who ruled from 1485 to 1509, his son Henry VIII from 1509 to 1547, Edward VI from 1547 to 1553, Mary I 1553 to 1558, and Elizabeth I from 1558 to 1603. While Henry VIII was son to Henry VII, Edward, Mary, and Elizabeth were the three children that Henry VIII had from different wives. Henry VII came to the throne when the War of the Roses ended, because he was one of the protagonists of the Battle of Bosworth, during which Richard III was defeated and killed. The first thing he did was to ban the nobles from raising their own armies, and he had to deal with frequent Yorkist plots. His foreign policy was cautious because he wanted other monarchs in Europe to be their allies. For this reason, he married his first son Arthur to the Spanish princess Catherine of Aragon and 2 of his daughters to the kings of France and Scotland. Henry VII sponsored John Cabot to explore Eastern America and planted the Tudor flag in Nova Scotia, which became the first English colony in North America. During his reign, Erasmus of Rotterdam brought the humanism of the Renaissance to the universities of Oxford and Cambridge, and Sir Thomas More moved England closer to North European origins of Protestantism. It is often remarked that the Tudor dynasty started the Renaissance in England, and from that moment on, the Middle Ages were officially declared ended. Henry VII's second son was Henry VIII. He was known as the Golden Prince for his natural good looks, his chivalry, and his education. He was a great sportsman, and as well as a musician and a poet, and he was very popular with ladies. He was very popular both with the English elite and the English public. He was granted by the Pope with the title of Defender of the Faith for his Latin treatise defending the sacraments against Martin Luther. When his brother Arthur died, he married his wife, Catherine of Aragon, who only bore him a daughter, Mary. Uncertain of his position and wanting to secure a male heir for the throne of England, he asked the Pope for a divorce to marry his pregnant mistress, Anne Boleyn. When the Pope refused, he declared himself supreme head of the Church of England with the Act of Supremacy in 1534, putting an end to Catholicism in England. He dissolved all the monasteries and took possession of all of the Catholic Church's properties in England. So the new merchant class had access to a landed status. So he used the money and the land of the church to pay to secure the support of both the middle class and the aristocracy in England. When Anne Boleyn gave him a daughter, Elizabeth, he first tried to divorce her, but then he accused her of treason, so the queen was tried and executed, and his daughter Elizabeth was considered a bastard and raised up away from the court. Henry went on to have 4 more wives and only one son, Edward, later Edward VI, from his third wife, Jane Seymour. Edward VI succeeded his father on the throne of England when Henry VIII died in 1547. He was a very sickly child, and actually his uncle, Lord Seymour, ruled in his place. He made Protestant doctrine fully accepted, and he proclaimed that religious services had to be held in English instead of Latin. Under his reign, the Book of Common Prayer was prepared by the Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Cranmer, and became the only book of prayer compulsory in England. After his death, his sister Mary came to the throne of England. Being raised up as a Catholic, Mary refused to abandon the Catholic faith. So during his reign, she tried to restore England to Catholicism. She persecuted the Protestants, so she earned the nickname of Bloody Mary and became very unpopular to the people, also when she married the Catholic Philip II of Spain. She died without having any children, so after her reign, her sister Elizabeth became queen in her place. Elizabeth I is considered the greatest and the most important and most popular English queen. Her reign was very long and lasted from 1558 to 1603, during which she never married because she claimed she was married to her people and to her nation. She became queen of a divided nation, and the majority of which was anti-Catholic and anti-Spanish. So during her reign, she did her best to bring peace between these two factions. She was very tolerant, and being a Protestant, she never persecuted the Catholics. Moreover, she was a very intelligent and had a very strong personality. She could speak French, Latin, and Italian. She consolidated the Reformation by reintroducing the Act of Supremacy and uniformity to the English Church, but she also allowed tolerance in church and ceremony ornaments. She used his being unmarried as a political weapon because she let other princes or other kings court her for a very long time without consenting her hand to anyone. She said that the queen was married to her people, and she became known as the Virgin Queen. She often went on royal progresses to be seen and to get to know her people, and she also inspired literature, music, drama, and poetry during her reign. Several portraits of the Queen were painted as part of royal propaganda, showing her as a symbol of unity and peace. But during her reign, danger came from Mary, Queen of Scotland, who was great-granddaughter of Henry VII and had a claim to the English throne through her mother, through her grandmother, who had been Henry VIII's sister. She had married the Stuart Lord Darnley and had a son, James. When the court forced her to abdicate in favor of her one-year-old son, she went to England, hoping to receive help from her cousin Elizabeth. But she was arrested and kept prisoner because she had started to conspire against Queen Elizabeth. She was executed for treason in 1507. During the reign of Elizabeth I, a conflict rose between England and Spain for the dominance over the Atlantic and for the routes to America. Spain was recognized as the Queen's main trade rival and enemy. So the Queen encouraged sea captains Francis Drake and Walter Raleigh